Okay, great. So I'm going to start with a traditional Buddhist poem, or set of lines. The human body at peace with itself is more precious than the rarest gem. Cherish your body. It is yours for this one time only. The human form is one with difficulty. It is easy to lose. All worldly things are brief, like lightning in the sky. This life you must know as a tiny splash of a raindrop, a thing of beauty that disappears even as it comes into being. Therefore, set your goal. Make use of every day and night to achieve it. So, we're following a series on the Lakshanas. The Lakshanas are 3 reflections that the Buddha taught, 3 ways of looking at experience, and 3, they sometimes can be sort of seen as statements about experience, but they're only statements about experience in terms of how practical they are, in terms of releasing the mind. So the Lakshanas, they're known as the 3 marks of conditioned existence, 3 characteristics of experience, and sometimes they can be thought of as weak spots in reality, or weak spots in the construction or the way that our mind constructs reality, and that if we push upon them a bit harder, then our experience will change. So the Lakshanas, we started last week with dukkha, so suffering, unsatisfactoriness is probably the more appropriate term, and Amala Yoden was talking about that. And maybe I'll just recommend that you listen to his talk about dukkha. And the second, the traditional order of it is actually starting with impermanence, which is what we're doing today, and then the third one is insubstantiality. So these 3 areas of reflection lead our minds to liberation if we put enough effort into it. If we start to discipline our minds, use them in meditation, they're sometimes known as doorways as well. So that they sound like metaphysical statements. It sounds like the Buddha was saying that everything is impermanent. That sounds like a truth about reality. What the Buddha didn't want to do is make those kind of statements about reality. What the Buddha said was, if you reflect on the impermanence of your experience, your mind will change and you will experience a quality of freedom hitherto unknown. So Buddhism's always practical and rarely metaphysical. So it's rarely speculating about the nature of reality. Because Buddhists are human beings, it does happen. Human beings like to speculate. So there are Buddhist speculations, but the Buddha was actually extremely cautious about making those kind of speculations. So it's method rather than doctrine. Does that make sense? So we use these reflections as reflections, not ideas by which we construct our world. In a way, they're reflections to deconstruct our rather shoddy ideas about how things are. So impermanence is one of the big Buddhist ideas, isn't it? It's one of the sort of main things that we think of actually when we think about Buddhism. The fleetingness of experience, and it's not contained within Buddhism at all. We'd be stupid human beings if we didn't notice there was things did come to an end. So it's not that Buddhism it's not that the Buddha was the first person to notice that. In a way, the Buddhist reflections on impermanence are to do with, well, what do we do about it? What do we do about the fact that we will perish inevitably? That's a starting point anyway. I think what Buddhism does is reflect on it really thoroughly. And in this session, I'm just going to talk about a few different ways that we can do that. There's different approaches to reflecting on impermanence, from sort of very honed meditative reflections to broader reflections about the whole context of our lives, being within our life started with birth and ends with death. Those are the big changes. So maybe it's just helpful to sort of remind us of some of the images in the poem that I just read. So it reminds us that human life is brief. So it reminds us that there is death. And sometimes in Buddhist imagery, we'll see Buddhist figures carrying skulls. Some of them more sort of ferocious and wild Buddhist figures, Buddha figures even, are garlanded with skulls. Yeah, so a quite unsubtle, let's say, reminder of our mortality. Other Buddhist traditions, the Zen tradition, really sort of took on the poignancy of the fleetingness of our lives. Beautiful haiku imagery. The sort of a leaf falling from a tree, the fragileness of a flower, all start to be symbols of what's so fleeting and precious. And in the poem that I just read, which is by a Tibetan Buddhist teacher called Tsongkhapa, some of those images are there, like a tiny splash of a raindrop, or the briefness of the lightning in the sky. Yeah, so my life, to me, doesn't feel like lightning in the sky. It feels quite long, and sometimes it feels really long. Or like experience can feel like really long. And some of this reflection on impermanence, it just can be quite interesting on how we follow our sense of time, and what seems long and what seems not long. How our mind creates an experience of eternity when we're bored or unhappy, or when things are dragging on, and then certain experiences of ours might just feel very brief. So my life does not feel to me like a lightning in the sky, but if I think about it and place it within cosmic time, well, of course it is. It's like nothing. It's like nothing. And probably, I imagine, if I am lucky enough to have a deathbed and a chance to reflect on my life, I imagine that will be feel more true. Like, oh gosh, didn't that go quickly? What did I do? And that kind of awareness of our own mortality and our own death can really galvanise us to think, okay, I would like to live a life of meaning, so that by the time I get to that imagined scenario of a deathbed, I know what I did and I feel fulfilled. So that's one of the ways that we can reflect on impermanence. It's just the duration of our own life, and also the fact that all of our loved ones are also mortal. Yeah. And that's not designed to be morbid or depressing. It's just true, and the truth, in my experience, has a very refreshing effect on me. Yeah, even if it's a truth that is hard to look at. So I don't know if you've sort of ever experienced this. There's certain things that anything. It can be like lots of different things. I mean, even like a bad conscience. If you don't want to look, there's a sense of like not wanting to look at it, and it just kind of stews away on its own. If you look at it, it might take quite a lot of effort to be like, okay, I'm gonna look at you, but actually it's a relief. Yeah. So reflecting on in this way that we're not immortal can feel like a relief. I remember when this is, in a way, it's a trivial example because it's actually doesn't really affect me that deeply. But I remember when I was in my 20s and I got my first grey hairs, and there was part of me that was just like, oh yeah, I'm not going to be young forever. I'm not young forever. That feels quite nice, just to be like in time properly, not this sense of like indestructible, immortal. It felt quite like a relief. Now I just want to caveat that, because if I'd had a much more severe kind of reminder about my immortality, I probably would have felt completely differently. Yeah. So there's that aspect of reflecting on impermanence, of the fact that we're all of us mortal, all human beings, and in fact what the Buddha talked about. He talked about when he reflecting on his own life and the sort of questing quality of his life. He said there's ways to live your life. He called them the ignoble quest and the noble quest. And he said, let me just find where he said it. He's talking to his monks, the monks following him, and he says there are these two searches, the ignoble search and the noble search or quest. And this is the questions that he asked himself. He said that himself being a person subject to birth, and subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilements, relies upon other things that are also subject to birth, aging, death, illness, sorrow. Yeah. So what he's saying is, we're all mortal, and we invest our hopes on really precarious things that we're not going to survive, and we invest all our hopes on other things that are also not going to survive. And that's dangerous. It's like walking on melting ice above above the sea. Yeah, it's like treading on something that's not going to hold our weight. Do you see what I mean? So what he talks about, the things that people rely on. We can think of our own version. So he lists contemporary things from his time: spouses and children, men and women, slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares, gold and silver. So this is him observing what people invested their sense of security in, like ownership, hereditary. I think when he's talking about spouses and children, he's talking about a sense of what is it? What's the word that I'm trying to think of? When having your line.
Purpose.
No, not purpose. Legacy. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Like your own genes carrying on. And we can think of our own version. So I don't know. Let's try. Like what are our versions of goats and sheep and elephants and gold and silver, and like what do we in the what? Just thinking about the if we were the Buddha and we were giving this talk, what would we say that people? Expensive watches, cars, yeah, okay. Houses, yeah.
Romantic relationships,
yeah. So what happens there when
it's like an over-investment in the partner as being like forever, maybe,
Yeah.
and then, you know, they could leave, or they could get ill, or they could die, or they could, I mean, there's so many things that could happen to them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Any others? Pets? Oh yeah. Yeah, people have a lot of pets these days, don't they? So what's going on there with?
I think that you can, in some ways, rely upon them in the same way that you might rely upon a partner or a child or a friend. And in some ways as well, I mean, I can speak for myself, but you know, I've had a cat for a very long time, and he's really connected to my identity now. But he's not going to last forever. So then what?
Yeah. Yeah, pets are usually a built-in tragedy, aren't they? So usually don't last as long as us. Yeah. Sorry? Oh, sorry.
Good job.
A good job. Yep. Okay. So why is that precarious?
I mean, so many things can happen. You could get fired. You could fall out of love with it. You could, well, you're going to retire one day. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. And what is it that a good job represents? Like what status? Yeah. Success. Security. Yeah. So we're looking for
80% of our time.
Yeah.
Default thinking.
What thinking? Sorry.
Default,
Thinking.
not purpose thinking.
Okay. So.
Default thinking, I mean by that is like a religion or a society.
Okay. So something that we haven't thought through that we take on
You
wholesale
apply
without questioning it. Is that it? Or
you could constantly end up in dead ends by applying the same methods and knowledge. You're not open to applying other tools from other societies.
Okay, so it's when your set of beliefs becomes narrow, yeah, and maybe a kind of dogma rather than an actual way of exploring. Yeah, so that's really true, isn't it? Yeah, so then there becomes a religious identity, and that's a good point, because I think any religion or spiritual tradition can, because it's lived out by human beings and because of human tendencies again, the danger is that it becomes another identity, and that's what I mean, in a way, that's what can happen if we start. You know, we can definitely start to do that if we start practicing Buddhism. It's like we come along with beginner's mind. We find the practices really help us. We make changes, and then at some point we find we're sort of comfortable, and we're comfortable, and we rest in a Buddhist identity. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm a Buddhist, but forget to keep doing the work, and forget to keep keeping the practices fresh. So so some of these ways that we rely on that which is not reliable are quite subtle as well. Any more while?
What would you say about songs that we write? You know, like leaving a legacy of songs.
Oh yeah.
Would that because they obviously at some point there would be no one to sing them, right? Even if your song was successful and blah blah blah. So that feels like a positive thing to do, but it's still putting your hopes in a legacy that carries on that ultimately won't, right? Yeah,
well that's a really good point, because what the Buddha isn't saying is he's not trying to negate all creative act, and it is quite easy to especially when you're reading the old Buddhist text, to sort of think, oh, it's a load of things that you're not meant to do. So let's say there's songs and other creative acts of creativity, and I think it depends very much on what the attitude is when you're creating them. So I think when one watches biographies of great singers, there's this like youth, isn't there, where they're actually creative, and then they get corrupted by the record industry, addicted to fame and status, then that there's a huge hole within themselves, and the self-destruction comes in, etc. And that the creative spark goes. So it's when you rely on all the trappings that come with the creative act, that's when you're on something precarious. But that, like, if you write songs, you'll know when you're creating, like, there's something pure there that can then turn into something else. So Buddhism isn't saying that all of our impulses are necessarily negative. It's sort of what we do with them as well. Yeah. Because if one's writing a song or making something, one's involved in it for its own sake. And probably everybody's done this, like in some sort of creative, or even like in your work or something, you might be thinking, oh yeah, people are going to love this, or I don't know, can't wait to what am I going to wear when I first sing it? I don't know. What are the reviews going to be like? But that hasn't got that much to do with the actual finding of that creative, the act of creation. Yeah. And as long as you take that lightly, I think it's taking all these things lightly as well is important. So this is how the Buddha outlined his own quest, really. So what we know is that he saw these four sights. He saw someone old, someone sick, and someone dying, and realised that this spoke not only to them and other human beings, but to his own experience, and it caused sort of seismic tremors within his own being, seismic kind of a massive existential crisis. And this, as he's reflecting on it, he's saying, well, I relied on a sense of my own security, which turns out to be completely deluded. And then he followed the idea of a religious wandering life in the search for something that would give him actual security, which would, I sort of feel like I'm saying this in a very complicated way, but given that we're all subject to aging, sickness and death, what do we do about it? Where can we find security in the face of such insecurity, such precarity? That's his question, and he's saying it has to be something transcendent. It has to be something that's more than the insecurity that this mundane world offers. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It kind of brings to mind, have you seen the film Triangle of Sadness?
No.
Has anyone seen it?
Yeah.
It's just basically all about what happens when the social rules get turned upside down, and those with wealth and status end up on the bottom.
Oh yeah.
And those that have nothing end up on the top.
Yeah.
That's kind of the simplest way. And then I think the film was really powerful for me because it just made me realise how, in the blink of an eye, all the things that certain people have relied on in terms of, say, like their success and their the wealth that they have mean nothing in a different context, and then they're the most impoverished of everyone.
Yeah.
And so it can seem so solid in a certain context, and then suddenly it can all go.
Yeah.
And then
Exactly.
And then a lot of that film was about those characters trying to figure out what meant anything.
Yeah.
Once all of that was taken away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Buddhism's, I think one of the things what the dangers of these Lakshana reflections actually is that, we go deeply, what I'm talking about tonight in particular is going deeply into impermanence. So what the Buddha said is actually not only not only are we born, that the minute that we're born, we're like a plucked flower, that our mortality is built into the very fact of our birth. But everything in the meantime is subject to change. Every single moment is made up of change, and the implication of this is not only do we, it's not that we change actually, and this leads into next week's topic, but it's not that we change, but there is only change. Yeah, so there is no, my sense of myself is that there's a kind of, I've walked onto the stage of the world, I come along, I interact a bit, probably like a centimetre deep. I'm affected about a centimetre deep, but there's essentially within me a kind of quality of meanness that enters the stage, does my part, and then leaves again. Yeah, but what's actually going on is that everything about me is completely reliant on the conditions, or another way to say conditions would be the circumstances around one, completely supported. So there's nothing self-sustaining about me or my meanness. Yeah. So Kusalasara cannot sustain herself separate from conditions. Let's start with the breath. That's one of the reasons we focus on the breath, because it's a very obvious way in which we interact with the world in a life or death sort of way. It doesn't feel life or death because we don't pay that much attention to it. Do you see what I mean? So there is only change, and this sense of me is just the fact that I ascribe a sense of meanness to the patterning that is me. Yeah, that is that I need a sense of self. There is this kind of patterning that I recognise, and I call it Kusalasara. And it's really hard to find that, because our sense of ourselves is so strong. But we can just pay attention to this quality of change, and we start to soften it. So what I'm going to I've approached this in a slightly different order, but I'll say a few more things to try and get to where we're getting at with that. So so there is only change, and we could say that actually reality is this continuous flow. It's a flux, yeah. And we're never ever outside of that. We're never ever outside of the flow of experience. But what we do is we seize on aspects of it, and we objectify them. And we demand final satisfaction from them. So I'm going to give two examples of some films that made me realise, that helped me understand this. So there's a film, and I can't remember the name of it, and I've googled loads of different terms. Anyway, I tried to get it for you. It's a Japanese film, and it's about a company that you can hire actors, and they create these beautiful moments for you. So one woman, she really wanted to feel famous, so they turned her into like they got loads of paparazzi. They pretended to be paparazzi, walked her down the street, like spent ages helping her choose her outfit, and then like they all went snapping, and then like all the others, just random people on the street, were like, "Ooh, it's her! Ooh!" And then like everybody turned and looked at her, and she felt famous. So she wanted to feel famous, and so they do this whole scenario. And then a more poignant one is that a mother hires one of the actors to pretend to be her daughter's absent father. So then they start this relationship, and that's, they start being morally compromised, because this daughter thinks that she's now finally met her father. Anyway, one of them scenario. So there's all these different scenarios. There's people, just troubled people, trying desperately to grab something to make them feel complete. And one of them is a woman who had won the lottery, and how they'd done it is that she was just at home, and then this TV crew came with like balloons and party poppers and I don't know, confetti, and it wasn't like a life-changing amount of money, but it was like quite a lot of money. I can't remember how much. But she wasn't bothered about the money. She wanted this company. They were called like something like Happiness Incorporated or something. She wanted them to recreate that moment when she got the knock at the door. You can imagine, can't you? You'd just be so thrilled. You got the knock at the door. All these people burst in, like all this hoo-ha, and you get them that money. And that's the bit that's like really good. Felt really good. And then actually having the money, all of that came after was a bit of an anticlimax for her. So she hires this company to feel good again. Do you see, like I was thinking about this myself, because often when we hear these talks about impermanence, and people say things like, oh, well, we think everything's permanent, but it's not. And I've been thinking, well, I don't think everything is permanent, but I know what I do is that I seize aspects of reality and I want them to gratify me entirely once and for all. Yeah. So I create a sense of finality with my ignorance, with my deliberate not looking beyond it. So you win the lottery or you want that sensation, but even if you replay that every single day, well, first of all, it's not going to feel so good third time in a row, is it? But you're still alive. You're still like just a person with all these other complex things. So it can't ever finally satisfy you in the way that having a career, it might feel good when you're on the up, and then what? I mean, not to say that there's anything wrong with a career or even winning the lottery or having a romantic partner, or pigs or goats, whatever. Probably, yeah. So it's just the way that we demand a kind of sense of finality. So there's our experience is a flux. We feel insecure around that, so we seize upon an idea that's going to make us feel once and for all this, yeah? And often it's, there's this list of things called the worldly wind, so often it's like praise, if I do this, then I'll be praised. And then we don't think, and then slowly that sense of warmness from the praise will disappear, and then by the next day I'll feel hollow again and be
wanting more praise.
yeah, or like consoling myself with chocolate, or we don't think, we sort of seize upon these ideas as finalities, and I think that's one of the ways that we don't see impermanence. We don't, as William Blake says, he who binds himself to joy does the winged life destroy. He who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. So we don't just let pleasures flow through us. We're like the woman who won the lottery. We have an idea, we seize it, and we hold on to it. And I see myself sort of living through my day a bit like that. Like, oh, I'm looking forward to lunch. I'm looking forward to this bit, and I'm not looking forward to that bit, so let's press 1.75 speed on that meeting and get, like I want to change the timings of all my experiences, but and the experiences that I don't like, I'm withdrawing from it, as though I've got an idea that I can not participate in this bit, or not fully be there. And by doing that, I'll think about something that I am looking forward to, and that takes me away from the current experience, which actually is reducing. It diminishes me, and it doesn't allow for the richness of reality because sort of seizing on a series of concepts or like imagined ideas and living through them rather than what's actually happening. So So there's another film which I can remember the title of. It's called Ida. It's a Polish film. Has anyone seen it? Sangadaran's seen it. So in this film, there's a young woman. She's been brought up in a Catholic nunnery, and she's going to make her vows to finally. I don't know. Is it like you're a novice and then you become a nun, or she's going to take anyway? But because she hasn't seen any of her family for many, many years, the Mother Superior sends her out, and I think that maybe this is something they do. You have to go and see your relatives, and then she's going to just live in this place, in this nunnery. And so she goes and visits her aunt, and a whole exploration of her family history. And of course, she's 17 or 18 or something. She falls in love. She meets some jazz musician and she falls in love. And, he's lovely. And as a viewer, one buys into this love story. And, yeah, he's great. She's beautiful. And he says, well, come on tour with me. And she says, well, then what? And he says, well, then maybe we can get a flat together. Maybe we can settle down. And then she says, then what? And then we can get a dog. And then she says, and then what? And we have a family, maybe. I can't remember. And she just keeps saying, and then what? And you realise then that she's not bought into this idea that he's presenting. And in a way, we don't really know what she's bought into, because the film shows the life in the nunnery as really quite severe, and we don't have a sense of their inner life, but she must have an inner life that means that, and then what means closer to God. Yeah, so she's chosen a religious life. It doesn't come to an end. So she's choosing a then what that will keep on opening up, and that's what the Buddha said we can do. So it's not like because everything doesn't last, we are doomed and we're only dust. The Buddha said, but there is a then what, and it's the noble path, and it's an opening path. We open if we choose to practice, if we reflect, if we need all of these other things as well as a deep understanding of impermanence. We need the metta bhavana. That's why we started the evening with the metta bhavana. We need shraddha, faith. Which means that we need to believe that everything doesn't rely on the mundane world going our way. We need a sense of the spiritual community, sense of something much, much more vibrant and alive than we can possibly imagine. That's the then what, and you can't really answer that then what. But if you get a taste of it, then you can trust the next and then what. Does that make sense? So if you get a taste of something in meditation, it's like, oh yeah, let's follow that. I don't know where it's going. But it's quite different from seizing upon an idea that's going to finally resolve us. Yeah? So with these Lakshana reflections, they're also there's the other side of the reflections, which are called the samadhis, or the animita samadhis, which is even less talked about, in a way, that the qualities of the freedom of mind are slightly different for each Lakshana. So if we reflect on dukkha, the mind is liberated in a certain way, which is called the wishlessness. If we reflect on impermanence, the mind is liberated in a way that's described as signless. Yeah. So rather than our minds being full of, let's say that these ideas that we seize upon are they're signs. We've created out of the flow of experience a sort of objectification, a sign of something. The mind that's liberated through reflecting on impermanence is called the signless, as in it doesn't reduce everything to abbreviated concepts. It allows everything in our experience to be vibrant, bigger than it is, rather than smaller than it is. It's quite hard to explain, especially as I'm not liberated. But it is important to have a sense that these freedoms are there. The other side of it, it's not just a sort of technique that the way that this can be misunderstood is that if we use these Lakshana reflections as mere technique without a broader view of something transcendent, because actually reflecting on impermanence, any scientist can do that. It's obvious that the materiality of our experience is changing all the time, and this thing that people say that all of our cells are renewed every 7 years, so there's no part of our body that remains the same 7 years ago. It doesn't matter, even if they did it, even if all of our cells were exactly the same, we'd still be supported by conditions. We'd still be part of impermanence. This candlestick, cells are not reviving every 7 years, but it's not outside of conditionality. Does that make sense? So where do I want to go? Noticing these things does require great discipline. So to keep the mind subtle enough even to notice it does require great discipline. But it's also there all the time anyway. So we can notice, we can just sort of train ourselves to notice the fact that there is change, that we ourselves are getting older, that we remembering that we will die, that our loved ones will die. And in meditation we can work much more moment to moment. So that's another way of reflecting on impermanence, is noticing the changingness of moment to moment experience. So and you can do this even if you're really distracted, because you'll notice that your thoughts are not they're not staying the same. Do you see what I mean? So like it's always available, this reflection on impermanence. Sorry, it's I just want to think about what order I want to talk about everything that's left. So yeah, maybe I think what I'll do is just talk about one more thing that the Buddha said, and then we'll end with a really I don't know if it's a meditation, but like a very short meditation, and then that will be the end of the evening. So the whole point of this is to achieve this mind that is liberated. And what we notice, I think what I've tried to point out, is the relationship between how we ascribe things a sort of sense of finality, or trying to wrest experience and bring it to us, is motivated by craving. So if we do all of these Lakshana reflections, also help us undermine what the Buddha taught as the taproot of craving. So do you see? So with dukkha, with unsatisfactoriness, we crave pleasure, and we there's aversion as well. So aversion is just a different way of describing craving. It's like pushing away experience because we want another experience. With impermanence, it's craving that makes us grasp at this sort of unreflected grasping that we have, this idea that doesn't even come to our conscious mind as an idea, that certain things are going to give us a sort of final satisfaction. I mean, do you notice that, this kind of idea that, if I do such and such, and then, I think for me, I'm like, and then I'll be this resolved human being. That's a kind of like background thought. And it doesn't come to the surface in those words. It's just more like that. And then I'll just be able to rest. Then nothing will be difficult, or something like that. I'll just feel good, or whatever. Anyway, what was I talking about? So yes, and next week when we're looking at this quality of insubstantiality, which is what we talk about when we say no fixed selfhood. It's this idea of a self that we must defend, that we sort of grasp at as well. And behind that is this desperate craving. Someone described it as ruthless craving. Anyway, this isn't only about our own practice, but as Sanghadaram was talking about in the first half, where he really evoked the connectedness and the satisfaction of that. So when we're getting rid of craving, we're opening up to non-self-centeredness. So the freedom has this quality, not of personal freedom, but of connectedness to all living beings. And what that is described as is love. So we're the qualities of reflecting on the Lakshanas should result in a more loving heart. Yeah, partly because we reflect that everybody, and sometimes I do the metta bhavana like this, everybody, even that difficult person, will die. And it changes everything. So the Buddha said, those who realise that we're heading for death will compose their quarrels. And I think that's sort of like an understatement. I think it's even more than that. One composes one's quarrels, but actually those who realise we're heading for death will love human beings, will love other human beings. I think that's what naturally happens, and all of the irrelevances about our preferences, about how other people are and what they do, and why they might do it, they just go because of the tenderness of our situation. Yeah. So I think that one of the questions is, how can we love people and not hold on to them? And I think that starts to help us with that. Yeah. So how people are another thing that we crave, aren't we? There's we mentioned this, romantic partners, but family, friends, we desire them to be certain ways. We want them to be happy, and sometimes we want them to be happy so that we can be happy, and that doesn't have this quality of freedom. Letting so that this reflection of our own and everybody's mortality, if it's not fueled by sort of mortal anxiety, if it's done with enough positive emotion, we're doing the metta bhavana enough, then we'll be able to hold this whole situation with a great deal of tenderness and evoke this poignancy that I think the original poem that I read at the start will describes so well. Okay, so what I'm going to do, just to end, we're going to do a sound meditation actually. So this is one of the things that you can reflect on. I'll change the lighting. So I'm just going to ask you to sit in meditation. We'll just quieten the mind, and I'm going to ring the bell, the singing bowl, and I just want you to notice how that, I just want you to just see if you can keep your attention on it and just be with the changingness of that experience. Yeah, so moment to momently, that will do. Moment to moment, just engaging with the fluctuating vibrations, the coming and going of sound hitting your ear. And if you find that your mind won't go there, understand that this is difficult, and that our minds don't necessarily want to engage with the quality of change. They're not used to it, and you can just notice that as well. The Buddha said it took a huge amount of discipline and meditation. It requires a lot of us. We have to be behind it in order to we have to be really behind it in order to actually completely liberate ourselves. But if we can just get a little taste, then we might be able to follow that thread of like, and then what? That leads us on to the next, and then what? In an open way. So we'll listen to the singing bowl, sound meditation, just noticing this quality of change, and then I will read the Human Body at Peace with Itself poem, and then that will be the end of the evening. So just resting into your seat, just bringing your mind closer to your body, kind of slowing see if you can be present. To experience just now. And if there's something else that your mind is looking for, something drawing you away, see if you can just put that down. And be present in your body. Aware of changingness, not separate from it. human body, at peace with itself, is more precious than the rarest gem. Cherish your body. It is yours for this one time only. The human form is one with difficulty. It is easy to lose. All worldly things are brief, like lightning in the sky. This life you must know as a tiny splash of a raindrop, a thing of beauty that disappears even as it comes into being. Therefore, set your goal. Make use of every day and night to achieve it. Okay, so that's the end of the evening. Come back next week and impermanence will flow seamlessly into insubstantiality, which Amelie Odin's going to talk about.